How hard has it been for the United States to, quote-unquote, seal its border with Mexico?
Impossible.
So what do you think Yeravam ben Nevat, when he blocked the highways so people couldn't travel to Yerushalayim, how effective do you think it was? It was just on the official roads. And the Gemara even describes, the Yerushalmi more so, in a complicated process people would do because people wanted to continue to go to Yerushalayim. So there were some people who were bright enough to just go through the forests and the mountains, the same way people are going to illegally cross the border into the United States. And then there were other people who would take the major highway and they would just pretend that they were going for business and all sorts of, a whole complicated thing. But what was the point of Yeravam ben Nevat?
To stop, to make it slightly more difficult.
Giving those people who are looking for an excuse and reason,
No, to stop the people who really didn't want to go.
make himself feel like he was doing
Just I want to point out one thing. If he only put people to stop them coming from the north to the south, what other issue does he have?
People trying to leave.
People coming from the 2.5 tribes on the other side of the Jordan. He's got 2.5 of his tribes are on the other side of the Jordan. They don't need to go from north to south in order to get to Jerusalem. So the whole thing is just, he's making a statement. And you know, everyone has their way. They read the Gemara, so on and so forth. And there are those who very mistakenly believe that Yeravam ben Nevat was an idol worshiper. He was not. Yeravam ben Nevat was a very anti-idol worship person. The first time that you have someone of great substance speaking of Yeravam ben Nevat as an idol worshiper is in the 20th century, Chazon Ish. Everyone misreads what other people say, but everyone, through the Maharal, you know, from the Rishonim, the Achronim, the Maharal, they make it absolutely clear his issue was not that he was an idol worshiper. The issue was that he was the greatest person of his generation and had outsmarted King Solomon on numerous occasions because he understood the danger of a Solomon, of having a king who was beyond any human comprehension. And he felt that Shlomo HaMelech really, if he was the one who constructed the Beis HaMikdash, and that could very well be, you know, he built a really nice building, and it's incredible the way he did it and how he did it, and the perception that went into it, the planning, it's brilliant beyond brilliant, what he did. But the only way it could be maintained was by a Shlomo HaMelech. And in fact, if you read the Psukim carefully, but certainly if you read the Midrashim or the Targum, he built the Beis HaMikdash with the secret tunnels that they were going to use to hide all the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash when it would be destroyed. Because he understood that part of its very nature was that it eventually would be destroyed. It was something that couldn't last. He understood it. Otherwise, why build escape hatches inside of it? He understood it. And it's the reason he wrote Shir HaShirim. If you look at the Targum Yonasan, in the beginning of Shir HaShirim, the Targum says that he understood that whatever they experienced, the Song of Songs, whatever they experienced from the day of the dedication of the Mishkan, it wouldn't last. It wouldn't last. So therefore he tried to incorporate all the ideas and all the passion and excitement of the day of the dedication of the first Beis HaMikdash into the Song of Songs, which is really an incredible book. But, you know, it's too sophisticated for me to understand. That's what Chazal say about it. But it's holy of holies. Everything else is holy, and Shir HaShirim is holy of holies, Kodesh Kadosh, which has, you know, practical halachic implications. When Hoshea ben Elah removed the people who were blocking the roads, he said, whoever wants to go can go. So it could be that he knew nobody really wanted to go. But, you know, was also a sense, if you speak to Russians who had a bris milah during the Soviet Union, and you compare them to a Russian Jew now having a bris milah, it's not the same. When they had to risk their lives in order to have a circumcision, it was fantastic. Because they understood there was an entirely different sense. You know, here you can have a bris, and you have a party, you hand out cigars, and the father's all happy, the mother's suffering, the baby's suffering, but the father's excited and everything. It's really great. But remember, in Russia, everyone who's there at the party during the Soviet Union, they're risking their lives in order to do it. During the time of Yeravim ben Avad and all the generations that followed, anybody who wanted to go to Yerushalayim risked their life. You want to go, you're going to have to figure out a way to go, and you're going to have to risk your life. So the people who went to Yerushalayim were the people who didn't go because they had to, or didn't go because everybody else was going. They went because they really wanted to. They went because they understood there was no place else they could be. And Yeravim ben Nevat was convinced it was the only way to keep Yerushalayim alive. Because if everyone would go to Yerushalayim because everyone goes, or if everyone went to Yerushalayim because you have to, and there was no sense of, this is so worthwhile, I have to go, then you can't match the magnificence of a temple constructed by Solomon. It's the most magnificent structure in the world. Therefore, you can only go if you understand how important it is to go to such a fantastic structure. Like, I took a plane from Moscow to St. Petersburg, and we all had to stand up on the flight to hold the luggage compartments close, because the plane was like this, was shaking, so we all needed to stand up. All these businessmen were there and standing up and holding it closed. And everyone's laughing, everyone was smoking on the flight. It was wild, right? 2001. It was wild. So why would I do that instead of taking the train? Because the train to St. Petersburg, from Moscow to St. Petersburg, I took it back, it was incredible. And what you see on a train is unbelievable. You know, you see they left the Nazi tanks right outside the city to show you how close the Nazis came, right outside of Moscow. You could see the broken German machinery. In the same way you had they left Napoleon's weapons out so that people could see how far into Russia Napoleon got. Any of you went to Madrid? Right, so remember the fence, you know, the arch? Okay. There's a common thing. You go, it's unbelievable when you take the train. It's fantastic. Why did I take the plane? I was so desperate to see the Hermitage.
The what?
The Hermitage Museum. Because it's the one place in the world, if you want to understand what Malchus is, you can experience it there. It's, first of all, that a king was an engineer and an artist and a mathematician and a scientist and a philosopher, a huge Russia for sure, but that he was this incredible human being. It's what's there, and there's a sense, you know, for generations and generations, no peasants were allowed into the Hermitage. Because obviously only royalty can appreciate this magnificence. Which is why on Shabbos, you know that there's a halacha. Why is a Jew allowed to have a pet elephant? You're not allowed to have a pet elephant. Only a king is allowed to have a pet elephant. So why is a Jew allowed to have a pet elephant? Because all Jews are royalty. In other words, you can only go into Shabbos if you have a sense of royalty. If you're not royal, You have no right. You have no access to the greatness of what's there. So a person is going into Shabbos without this sense of greatness and, I have achieved something, I'm of a different status. You can't fully appreciate a Shabbos. You can't fully appreciate a davening. We don't go into davening as schleppers. We go into davening as the children of God. Royalty. You can't. A peasant can't access that sense of greatness. We don't go in as schleppers. That was the gift of the Baal Shem Tov. He was able to treat the most simple Jew as royalty, and he made them all feel that they were royalty. Hence the Hasidim wearing the clothes of nobility. Because you can't have Shabbos unless you're a nobleman. You can't. You can't do mitzvahs unless you have this sense of nobility. Who are you? Who are you, you peasant, to come and put on tefillin? Who are you, you peasant, to light Shabbos candles? What are you think that you have a right to access this? Till there was a huge fire, and all the peasants in St. Petersburg ran into the palace, and they took all the art and they brought it outside into this huge courtyard, which in and of itself is magnificent. And not a single painting, none of the gold, none of the silver, the clocks. You can't imagine what's there. Nothing was missing. They risked their lives to save the king's art from a building they were never allowed to go in, and not a single thing was missing. So the king, it was no longer the king, it was, what's her name, Catherine, at the time of the fire. So Catherine built a special section of the Hermitage where peasants could come and see lesser art. Now it's the wing where they show American art. but even then you have to understand, she realized that she had to acknowledge the peasants, but you can't allow a peasant to see it, because a peasant can't appreciate the magnificence of what's there. I often tell the story how my father used music, the Four Seasons, to teach me how to read a pasuk. But not everyone, can appreciate music. Some people appreciate art. So my daughter, Shoshana Batya, I took her. She's very visually oriented. So when I wanted to teach her how to daven and teach her how to read a pasuk, I took her to the St. Louis Art Museum. And it was a very powerful, very intense experience. She saw Rodin sculpture, and she looked at the sculpture and she started crying, weeping. She said, I feel like and she was 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old. She said, I feel like my life is over. And the name of the sculpture is Despair. So I took her to see my favorite artist, Rembrandt, because Rembrandt's the name of my Yitzhahara. And so we're looking at this. So we're looking at this painting, and
You want to ask why?
first, you all know, I hold very strongly you have to give your Yitzhahara a name, right? And the reason you have to give your Yitzhahara a name, because then you can treat it as something outside of yourself. The one person in Great Britain who wasn't depressed when the whole country was falling apart was Winston Churchill. He was able to give everyone hope, and yet he was chronically depressed. How did he do it? Because he gave his depression a name, Black Dog. So whenever he got depressed, he would just speak of it as this other party called Black Dog. So when the whole country is depressed, he wasn't, and he's the one who gave them hope. And that's why the night they made him prime minister, the whole country's falling apart. His first comment is, finally I can sleep at night, I'm in charge. He's not depressed. So I hold very strong, you have to give your Yetzirah a name. It has to be a name of how your Yetzirah presents itself to you. So for me, the Yetzirah has the power to make black, something dark, look very beautiful and colorful. If you look at Rembrandt, you'll see that his paintings, he can take dark colors, and it's black, and yet you can see the layers of it, and it can draw you in. So I call my Yetzirah Rembrandt. So I took her to see Rembrandt, because she already knew by that age that my Yetzirah's name was Rembrandt. And she's looking at this painting like this. Little kid, 5 or 6 years old, like this. She got it. And this guy walks in, and he was dressed, $5,000, like a really expensive handmade suit and shirt and cufflinks and everything, really top-notch dresser. And he walks in, he looks at the painting, turns to his companion, and he says, "Wow, look at this frame. It must have cost a fortune." So, Shosharabaya turned to me and she said, "He doesn't deserve to look at this painting." Right? That's why we don't deserve Shabbos if we're going in a schleppers. That's the idea of Kavod Shabbos. Kavod Shabbos is that we act with more dignity, meaning we act as royalty, because what right do you have to access the treasure of God? When you think every schlepper does? And that's why the whole idea is that we give our children, our students, our families a sense of your royalty today. So Yeravim ben Nevat understood that's what a Beis Hamikdash was. A Beis Hamikdash was a place where you would walk in and you would experience that because I am connected to this building, I am royalty, I am different. And I have to be royalty and be at such a level in order to appreciate its beauty. So as long as the Shlomo HaMelech is alive, it's possible, because you have a king there who can tell you this is what it is. But without a Shlomo HaMelech, you can't do it. If you have a Shlomo HaMelech and you come in and he goes, Rabbi Sher, I know exactly what you need from this building. And he would point out to you exactly what you needed to do in the Beis Hamikdash. And then you, and then you, and then you, each one, and he would say, this is the part of the Beis Hamikdash, it's perfect for you. This is what your role should be. He was a king who could listen to you, and he understood exactly what you were all about. Such a person, you wouldn't possibly walk into the Beis Hamikdash without a sense of royalty, but without him, it couldn't be that way. And for anyone to see a king sitting, which he would do once every 7 years, but only a king of the descendant of David sitting is allowed to sit in the Beis Hamikdash when he's reading the Sefer Torah for Hakel, when all the Jews will get together to hear the king read the Sefer Torah. It can't be a king, it has to be a king. The difference between, Ner Yisrael, when my grandfather was alive and my father was alive, it was even different with my grandfather. This was someone who knew the Chavetz Chaim, the Chaim Moser, the Dvar Avram, the Alter Slabaka. He knew it. He was connected to all of them. They wrote about him and this and this. When he would just enter the room, there was such a sense of, wow, that the aspirations of the students were different. Because he represents royalty, and there was this incredible sense of royalty around him. And it's not always there. And that's why what we aspire to are people like that. So Yeravim ben Nevat said, and he was 100% right, the only real king in this generation is me. And the worst thing for anyone to experience is for them to go to a Beis Hamikdash and see some schlepper, because he's officially the king, sitting and I am not. Because then they're honoring the position instead of honoring the greatness. And if you're not honoring greatness, you're going to lose your whole connection to the Beis Hamikdash. So don't go. It's no different than the golden calves. They put up 2 golden calves. You want to go? You have to aspire to go. You have to be willing to risk everything to go. That he understood. It was incredible. He did it the wrong way. He caused many people, many generations to sin, for which he loses his portion in the world to come. And we can't even begin to understand his greatness and what his intentions were. Hoshea ben Elah took away that whole sense. And that's why the 10 tribes were destroyed. He took away any sense of, of greatness. Of you needing to be great. You needing to do something fantastic in order to go to the Beis HaMikdash. So he took it away. And that's why he was immediately killed by the Assyrians and the 10 tribes were executed. But why, so then why make the 15th of Av a holiday? And not just a holiday, but a holiday equal to Yom Kippur. It's an incredible thing. This is going to be a little difficult. I hope I can articulate it though. Hashem's. I think that he was the first person in generations to understand what Yeravam ben Nevat had wanted to do.
Who was it?
Hoshea ben Elah, the last king of the 10 tribes. The fact that he understood what Yeravam ben Nevat wanted to do, even though he said, there's no one else who wants to do it. But the fact that he understood and appreciated Yeravam ben Nevat's intention meant he understood that there was a part of Judaism that's totally different when the whole message of Judaism is you have to live as royalty. He understood it. He couldn't access it and he couldn't use it, but he understood it. Do you hear the difference? It had been lost. People just accepted you couldn't go on the highway. People went, yeah, all right, you can't do it. No one understood. No one cared. They became idol worshippers. Yeravam ben Nevat went about it the wrong way. Chazal say, God forbid for me to say about him. But they lost any sense of what it was Yeravam ben Nevat was trying to accomplish until this Eisvarf. He's a Rasha, the Gemara says. He was a wicked man. Shami goes more into how wicked he was. But this wicked man understood what Yeravam ben Nevat wanted to do, and he said it doesn't matter anymore because there is no sense of greatness or royalty. But he understood that the Beis HaMikdash, he understood that Judaism represented royalty, represented dignity, represented I'm never a peasant when I go to the Beis HaMikdash. That's what it was supposed to do. And the fact that he appreciated that one thing is a cause for incredible celebration. Because here they are, everything is being destroyed, and yet what's the one thing everyone is talking about? What's the one thing everyone is talking about? Not the building, but the fact that people have to, in order for people to live as Jews, they have to be royalty. So he said we're not Jews anymore. But he got people talking about the fact if you're living without any sense of royalty, you're not living as a Jew. If you're living without any sense of, I deserve to access Shabbos. I deserve to access prayer. I deserve to access Torah because I have great dignity. And it is taught to children. It's not just, do you realize what a schus it is to study Torah and do mitzvahs without giving a child, speaking down to a child is a little contradictory, is it not? You can't speak down to someone and say, do you understand how lucky you are to study Torah? But to literally convey a sense every time a kid is learning, wow, he's so lucky. Wow, this is because of who you are and what you are, and building everyone who comes to learn into seeing their potential and their royalty when they're coming to learn, when they're doing mitzvahs, when they're davening. That Hoshea ben Elah appreciated, and he got people discussing it. And that's what saved our future. Because even without a Beis HaMikdash, there were Jews left who understood that to live with this level of relationship with God is to be royal. And that is as great as Yom Kippur. See, even the one who's fighting it, but even in the fighting it, he understood what he was fighting. You hear me? He understood what he was fighting. That's his greatness. Guys, I don't know how to say this powerfully. When we are told we're no longer on this madrega, we're no longer on this level, we don't merit this, we're not as great as previous generations, we're this, we have fallen so low, we are this, we are that. Instead of saying, wow, that you're learning in this environment, that you're willing to live as a Jew in this environment, and that makes you into royalty. Instead of saying, yeah, sure you keep kosher, it's so easy to keep kosher these days. Sure you keep Pesach, so you go to a hotel. Right? Sure you do this. So easy. Everything is easy these days compared to what it was 50 years ago. It's much easier. So if we say, Pesach is not the same. Let me tell you, Pesach's not the same. I remember my mother used to make the potato starch. You would cook the potatoes. I remember my mother koshering. I remember my mother, Allah Hashem, koshering the liver, and I remember grinding the meat from my grandmother with the I don't know what you call them. I remember those things. It's not the same. Now you go to a kosher butcher, everything is done. We're just not on the same madrega. Is saying we're not royalty. That's Tisha B'Av. A teacher who will ever speak down to a child, instead of understanding that the child is the king's child, and you're not going to ever speak down to the king's child. Ever. When you speak to the king's child, no matter how rotten and obnoxious the king is, you're going to be careful. That's Tu B'Av. Every time we bemoan how low we have fallen, instead of understanding, wow, for a Jew to want to not have actual intimate relations, so they're not Shomer Negiah. But for a Jewish kid growing up in this environment to still want to keep certain halachos, that's royalty. Do you understand? That Hoshea ben Elah, the Rasha destructive, he understood. He understood that. He said, he took the Tisha B'Av approach. And I believe that this opinion in the Gemara holds that the minute a teacher speaks down to a child, instead of speaking up to a child, the minute a parent speaks down to a child in the context of Yiddishkeit, how could you? You eisvarf. This is the way a Jew behaves. That's the Hoshea ben Elah approach. That's Tisha B'Av. The Tu B'Av approach is to see the royalty. Anytime someone comes to me, they're totally non-observant. Totally non-observant. But they want to have a frum wedding. Wow. Well, really, this is my opportunity to make them frum and to help them change and help them this. I'm looking down. They're going to be the victims of my mitzvah. But the minute they come in, you go, wow, what a statement. Well, I'd like to know how to keep Shabbos. Or is there any way that I can come to shul and driving my car that I'm not doing a sin? When a group of my balabatim, one of the cities where I was a rabbi, said, okay, we won't drive. We're going to buy a van, and we're going to hire a non-Jew to drive the van so we could come to shul on Shabbos. And that they had told other rabbis in this city about it. Oh, no, you're not allowed to. I took out a bottle of whiskey, and I made a l'chaim I said, wow, you are God's children. That's tu b'av. And we live with this all the time. We live with this all the time. I remember Rav Moshe's Levaya. One Rosh Yeshiva turned to Rosh Yeshiva sitting next to him, and he goes, you know, there'll never be another Rav Moshe, because we have air conditioning. You know, Rav Moshe had to work so hard in order to learn, so that's how he became Rav Moshe. But now we have air conditioning, we have food, no one will ever become Rav Moshe. That's Mamish Hoshea ben Elah. To say, yeah, but to live as a Jew when you were Rav Moshe was a lot easier than to live as a Jew in New York City or in California. That's a Shalom Aleichem, and that's a tu b'av. And imagine Jewish people living with a sense of dignity, because if I want to be able to daven, my mouth has to be a royal mouth, and therefore I'll be careful in the way I speak. In order to be able to learn Torah, my words of Torah, the way I look, has to be royal, and therefore I'm not going to use my eyes to look at something that is less than royal. In order to use my hands for mitzvah, my hands have to be the hands of royalty. I'm not going to use my hands, God forbid, to do something that a king wouldn't do, or the prince or the princess wouldn't do. Imagine if we lived like that. Imagine you go into Rockland Kosher and everyone is walking with tremendous dignity. And everyone is, oh, how are you? Please, you go first. Chas v'sham, how could I, take, grab, reach over you, push you, this and this, like it is, right? Imagine that. That would be tu b'av. Imagine speaking to the cashier the way a king would speak to the cashier, instead of speaking to the cashier down because they're not different or a different race, they're not religious, they're not Jewish or a different race. Imagine if we spoke with dignity. And someone said, you have such dignity. Thank you. That would be a tu b'av approach. And then we would have real access to davening, to Torah, and to mitzvahs. That's the next thing. Can I go on?
Please. Yeah.
Is that the way a prince speaks?
Actually, please.
Whose side are you on?
Actually, yeah, Prince will just say.
I have a feeling if I read that Gemara, I wouldn't see it the same. Like you do. I wouldn't see what yours.
Rebbe's reading it with dignity.
Possibility. I'm gonna read it, but
As a princess.
yeah, I hope I can see what you see.
If you read it as a princess, you will. I know someone who read some Torah with some dignity instead of inadequacy, and all of a sudden found all sorts of questions, the answers to her questions. All it takes is approaching with dignity.
Mindset.
What do you think that tznius is?
Just.
And that's why it's called kivuda bas melech. There first has to be a sense of being a bas melech, daughter of the king. Okay.
It's really funny. When you interviewed a Holocaust survivor, we asked her about tznius back then. Her answer was there's no such thing as girls not dressing tznius. Every single girl knew she was princess before God. And that was it.
That's it. That's. Do you think on the day that they were able to gone to Auschwitz, survivors were able to bury the dead. You think they would have turned that day into a yontif? So what happened at Beitar?
Must have been a good leader.
It was reintroducing dignity.
When it says that the bodies didn't decompose, they did an incredible thing, sister. An incredible thing. It was a terrible defeat, right? Terrible, crushing defeat. It was the Messiah, and he failed. Rabbi Akiva said it was the Messiah, which he was right, by the way, Rabbi Akiva. He was poskening halacha, which is a whole different discussion. To say that Rabbi Akiva made a mistake is to not understand what Rabbi Akiva was saying and actually telling us how a real leader has to function. Do you guys what to go around saying the bodies didn't rot? What message were they conveying? You did not lose your dignity. It's not that you have dignity, but even after a terrible tragedy, you did not lose. Imagine what's the difference, how would a Tisha B'Av approach response to 9/11 be? We need to do Teshuvah. The Beitar approach to 9/11 would be, you didn't lose your dignity. And how would you say you didn't lose your dignity?
Preservation of the body.
You would begin by saying, in the midst of a terrible tragedy, the degree to which people helped each other was unbelievable. The acts of chesed were unbelievable. The United, 93, right? The flight where they killed the hijackers even though the plane crashed, that was a Beitar approach. When people were just talking, do you know that the water taxis around New York City took more people, evacuated more people in a shorter amount of time than the big evacuation of Dunkirk during World War II? Did you know this? Almost 3 times as many people. It was a massive thing. The degree of chesed, there was no rioting. There was no looting. Nothing. Because there was a sense of you did not lose your dignity. I remember that I spoke at a memorial service, it doesn't matter where, and a priest spoke before. A priest spoke before me, and they wanted a priest, a minister, and a rabbi. So the priest spoke first, and spoke about how God is sending us, a message, and us, and we should weep and we should cry. And the minister spoke about the same thing, and God is telling us and of the power of evil, and by the time I got up to speak, everyone was just like you guys are now, sound asleep. And I spoke about that. For me, I stood up and I went like this. I was just staring at my hand. And everyone's waking up wondering why this lunatic is staring at his hand. And I said, for some people, the symbol of 9/11, the main picture is that guy jumping out the window. Remember those pictures? But for me, the most powerful sign of 9/11 was somebody reaching into the rubble to pull up someone who was like that. And all I spoke about was how we saw our dignity and our glory and so on and so forth on those days. And And my speech was the most well received. That's the bAv approach. It's when a kid has failed at something in school. So somebody, will say to the kid, don't worry, you'll get better, you'll turn it around, right? But then you're acknowledging the fault. The bAv approach is reminding us that there's some times that you cannot even afford to acknowledge the fall if the person is going to lose any dignity in it. And therefore, if the child has suffered a loss of dignity, the response has to be to show the child that there is no loss of dignity. So to speak down to the child, condescending, don't worry, mommy loves you, the way we speak to our kids and hit down as if they're idiots. So that's not the bAv approach. There are some times when you need the bAv approach, which is the whole emphasis has to be to get through to them that they have not suffered any loss of dignity.
It's not like denying?
No, not at all. Because being crushed by the Roman Empire, it's not loss of dignity. It's not. A family that goes through a terrible financial crisis in this economy, the main thing to do is to get the message across you have not lost your dignity. Would you go into the hospital and visit someone who's ill and said, don't worry, if you die, I won't allow your children to be treated as nabachs. Everyone will, but I won't. Don't worry. And your almana Mirza Hashem, You think I'm joking? My mother-in-law Hashem used to, because she ran this huge Bikur Cholim, used to keep a list of all the incredible things people would say to people who were sick. And my nephew made a YouTube about it. It is hilarious. It's the Rav. If you had been in shul, you would have heard that the Rav spoke that whenever someone is sick, it means that they did a terrible. I'm not Chas v'Shalom saying he did not fair, but maybe you should think of doing tshuva. You really don't look like you can eat this ice cream. I'll eat it for you, so it doesn't. It was incredible thing. Do you know how often? Yeah, it's how not to make a Bikur Cholim visit. His name is Shema. Shalom Meir Pesach. So, people visit the sick and they treat them without dignity. And there's very little dignity when you're lying there in a hospital bed for a long time with a million tubes and, and those hospital gowns and so on and so forth. There's not much dignity. Or when you go in for surgery, I got to tell you, the difference between going into surgery in Germany or Argentina and going into surgery in the United States is astounding. In Germany, they put you into this beautiful room with couches and lights and music, and you're fully dressed, and you're whatever it is, and they slowly get you to sleep. You never see the surgical suite. You're not there. You go to sleep, and when you wake up in a nicer place, and at no time are you aware of the fact that you're just lying there. But in America, right, you lie down on the table, they put you like this, they tie your hands, they think you're Yashka, right? So you have no dignity at all, and if it's back surgery, it's even worse, let me tell you. And boy, it's horrible. They take away any sense of dignity at all.
You're supposed to walk in the robe first before you get into the bed.
Some people are not able to walk.
Well, for me, I have to.
Oh. Okay. But you understand, we go, and even a shiva call, nebuch. To go in and pay a shiva call as a nebuch is an anti-bAv approach. And there's so many times this comes through, not just for Klal Yisrael, when we look at ourselves, you no longer have Gedolim, and now, you know, Rav Yashav Zatzal, we don't have him. That's it, we're gone. It's over. We don't have real Gedolim, like that. You know, we're not who we once were, is the anti-Beitar approach. Tu b'av could very well be, but anyone who comes to, you know, Monday night learning knows that there's even better things happening than having Gedolim, because we have tremendous dignity. True?
Wouldn't that lead to egocentric?
Yep.
That's
Nothing is as egocentric as seeing everything as negative, and I'm the one who's going to save the world. Instead of,
No, but I'm saying
if I look at you with dignity, no, it changes you and it changes me.
Yeah, but if you take a kid and only treat him with dignity, never show him the faults of what he's done.
What are you talking about? Who says not to show faults? But you can show faults without taking away dignity. There's a huge difference.
We'll discuss that another time, huh?
No, yeah, it's up to you. Well, let's do the wood. I love Hassan. They're just so smart. Okay, can I ask you a question? Do you have everything ready that you need for Rosh Hashanah? You ready?
No.
No? Okay. Gemara says you're wrong. It's Tu b'av. Whatever you need is done.
Nice.
All the preparation is over. You want to get into Elul, don't start, I need to prepare and I need to tapa. The day of collection is over. That's it. And if you drag out the preparation, it's going to be rotten. Everyone is preparing until 5 minutes before. It's the last chakras, it's the last mincha, it's the last Ma'ariv before Rosh Hashanah, the last Shabbos of the year, the last Havdalah of the year, the last this of the year. Take your chance of this and that, and everyone's preparing to the last minute. The Gemara says, when do you stop preparing? Tu b'av. That's it. The wood is there. Your whole avodah is ready. Now focus on the avodah instead of preparing. It's an incredible thing because no one will ever feel adequately prepared. So Chazal say, you know what? 15th of Av, it's over.
It's over and now?
Now get to work. Not preparing. Get to work. Seriously. This is why my mother, Allah Shalom, the first challah that she would bake for Rosh Hashanah, she would bake on Tu b'av. Everything's ready. The meat was bought. The meat for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur was bought by Tu b'av. Everything that you would need. The menu was decided. Everything prepared. That's it. Now we're ready for Rosh Hashanah. Okay. And now we were focused on. That's it. Now I'm different. Now I'm ready to do the avodah. But people go around, right? Come on. You can't look at a piece of wood and examine it. You put it under a microscope, an electron microscope. You find out there, and well, now everything has bugs. But in those days it didn't. Right? In those days it didn't. But they say, I don't want you checking anymore. The 15th of Av, it's over. Because otherwise, when are you ever going to feel adequately prepared to bring the carbon in the Beis Hamikdash? When are you ever going to feel like the Beis Hamikdash has everything it needs? It's over. It's done with. Stop the preparation. Get to work.
Isn't preparation?
Rock, scissors.
Isn't preparation doing work?
No. Real preparation, yes. But the preparation of, if you have the basics, and most people think that preparation is getting rid of your avodas. Doing tshuva and all the bad things you do. And for some reason, no one ever finishes. We all have so many averos. It's incredible. Maybe not you guys, but someone like me has so many averos that, by the time Rosh Hashanah comes, I've been preparing for Salah. I always experienced Elul as this downer in yeshiva and hearing all these shmuzim. If you ever did this avera, great. What's the point? I might as well not be from. It's like incredible. I didn't realize it was the world's biggest rush until every year on Elul. It was the most depressing time listening to all those schmoozing. Until I realized I had made up my mind not to listen to anybody at a very young age anyway. But do you understand? Look, shouldn't the whole year you be going out collecting, you find a beautiful piece of wood, you prepare for the Mizbeach? No. The basic stuff that you need, have ready. This is not a time for you to get rid of your Averos. That's not what Elul is. So it has to end with the beginning of Nechama. The whole process of Nechama is the negative stuff has ended. What people associate with the preparation is usually Teshuvah, right? And they teach Teshuvah as the very Christian concept of Teshuvah. You have to get rid of your sins. You have to feel terrible. I am a sinner. I am a this. I am a that. Which is not really what Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are about. And that has to end.
So the negative perspective needs to change.
Yeah.
At what?
I heard a voice.
I started saying something, but Shana was still saying something.
No.
At what
See,
point?
who's treating you with dignity. They thank you for treating you with such dignity. Yes.
At what point are they? At what point do you start teaching your kids dignity? I mean, Nechama. I mean,
The
not
Gemara-
dignity, Nechama.
Isn't that what Bristos starts teaching the dignity of being a Jew?
Yeah. That's supposed to be. That is what it is supposed to be.
What is?
A bris.
Or bris?
Yeah. Gemara says right away.
But how? I mean, I don't. I mean, I've gone through the yeshiva system. At one point, at no point do it's, as you just said, it's pretty much the Christian system.
Well,
You're a sinner.
no,
You're a sin. You know, all that other
that's
stuff. But
because you and I are
Yeah.
sinners. We're talking about you and me.
But at this age, how do you start approaching or doing or trying to get Nechama? How do you move forward?
Using any one of the different approaches we've spoken about tonight, but then to understand that if the whole effort is going to be to get rid of the past,
It's not getting rid, accepting the past and moving past the past.
so that was the approach of the Mesei Midbar, the people were dying in the desert. All the different pieces fit together. And you have to choose which one is most effective for you.
You said on Teshuvah,
I did.
you said about the way to create dignity was when Hashem put Chav on his lap and was braiding her hair.
That's true. Yeah. Yes.
I have two questions. I'm not very good with grammar. So, the Gemara, however, seems to imply that there never was a Yom Tov. Why does it seem to be talking about this in past tense? That would be my first question. And then my second question would be, you seem to imply that the Gemara is making this connection with Yom Kippur. It grammatically doesn't seem like it is,
Why?
because it would say it differently.
How would it say it differently?
It would say Kechamisha Asa b'Av ve Yom Kippur. Why does it say V'che Yom Kippur?
Because Yom Kippur is where they learn the principles to make a Tu b'Av. But Yom Kippur comes from God, a Tu b'Av comes from us. And the idea, your first question, both excellent questions. I like the first one better. I find it more profound, if I may say. Is there are times, let's say a person has a great daven, and the next time they daven, they go, wow, I hope it's as good as it was. Or a person had a fabulous Yom Kippur, and a person says, I hope this Yom Kippur will be as good as last year. It's not going to be a good Yom Kippur. The way you approach a Yom Kippur and the way you approach Tu b'Av is to say, there never was a Yom Kippur the way this one will be. There never was a Tu b'Av the way this one will be. It's an incredible statement by Chazal.
Do you apply that to Shabbos too?
Absolutely, absolutely. But the difference is, this is what we did with it. The dancing girls, do you realize what a statement it is for the Jewish people? Can you imagine this in our world? That the Jewish people said, this is the way to celebrate Yom Kippur.
But their Rebbe didn't do it, so they wouldn't do
That's
it.
Siyam Shas.
Mir Tzashem.
So it's a living in the moment, taking it moment by moment?
No, but it's never to say, I want to recapture what once was. Well, the best time in my life was blah, 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 blah. How many guys have I heard from, well, you know, when I was in yeshiva, I used to learn 36 hours a day, and I wouldn't go to the bathroom, and I wouldn't eat, and I wouldn't sleep. I was this incredible masmid, and everyone thought I was going to be the Gadol Hador. I can't tell you how many future, almost Gedolei Hador I have met in my life, all the guys. And I remember them when they were teenagers. It's not exactly the way I remember them, but okay, memories can be corrupted. But the minute somebody says, the way I used to know Gemara, well, good for you. It's like, every time I open a Gemara, I can open up a Gemara, I remember learning, it happens once in a while. I can open up a Gemara and say, wow, I remember I once learned this Gemara well. Am I going to say, well, I hope I learn it as well this time? No way. I open up a Gemara and I say, I never, ever learn this Gemara the way I'm going to learn it this time. That's Lo Hayu Yom Tov.
Thank you.
It's always looking forward. It's looking forward to living with the most incredible aspirations and expectations. This is when your Rosh Hashanah and your Yom Kippur begin. And this is how Teshuvah begins. Is to understand, wow, whatever is going to be happening over this Elul and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot is going to be beyond anything I ever had before. Not just to say it, but to live it